sound test to make sure everything's fine. So let's make sure the sound test is good. All right, cool. Everything looks good on the sound test. All right. So as there's nobody watching now, that's fine. I just basically want to give my take on this whole debate thing. As many of you already know, man, we just had a debate. It was between SoReal, Yahucanan, and it was basically, did Paul teach the law of Moses? Now, the debate should have been properly put. Now, if I'm mistaken on the title of the debate, someone please correct me. But what I'm going off of is not necessarily the title of the debate, but what we actually seen go on. On one hand, Yahucanan, we had that it was argued that the works of the law or the ordinances of the law has been done away with. And from SoReal side, what I saw was a lot of going to the explaining the law in the sense of the things that are written in the law, that the very things that Yahucanan was arguing that was done away with. So what I want to do is I want to give my take on basically what everybody or what they were arguing, and then kind of, I guess nobody really does this, but I'm gonna try to visualize, help visualize exactly what was nature. So let me do this. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. All right. So we have screen. All right. I'm basically going to use this as a dry erase board pretty much. Let's see here. Because I think everybody was just pretty much talking, not talking. They were kind of talking past each other. And like I said, if anybody listened to it and saw that I called in, they could see that I really gave props to Yahucanan for staying on topic to what was being talked about. But I didn't really give that credit over to SoReal, not because I don't like SoReal or anything like that. My opinion of SoReal is that I do think he's a very good brother. I think he has a very good spirit. He's very calm. I do see the works of the spirit, the fruit of the spirit in this brother. But there's just a lot of things that are simply just misunderstood. The other person I'd like to give props to that called in was G-Con, surprisingly. And I say surprisingly because I say that in the view of people's opinion. They think this feud and everything that's going on Shield Squad and stuff. He came in there and said exactly what needed to be said. And he didn't necessarily give the win to anyone. Basically, what he put it as, he just says there needs to be more understanding when it comes to this whole thing about the law and everything like that. And I studied with Ron when it comes to the covenants and everything like that, so I know what he means. All right, so basically, this is what it is. You have the covenants. Now, the old covenant that was made included these things. You had the tables of stone, right? This one top, right? And what you had to fulfill that, you had some things that need to be done. Okay. All right. So what this is right here, basically, this is the giving of the law by Moses. The stone ones, the ones engraved in stone, what we know as the 10 Commandments. Okay. And what we have over here is the book of the law. So what did the book of the law include? Okay. We know that the book of the law included the feast. We know that it included ceremonial things such as, well, we could call them feasts, but we also know there were cleanliness. Let me say this, cleanliness laws. We know that this will also include food, right? Body, things of that nature. Oh, I thought Bobby. Didn't mean to do that. Body, things of that nature. Let me make sure this is actually showing up right on the screen in YouTube. It is. Hey, what's up, James? How you doing, man? Appreciate that coming through. Hey, I don't have a lot of viewers now. It's cool, but I really just wanted to get this out here and explain it. If you feel that there's any deviation from what's being explained, by all means, I can invite you in. But this is just my take on basically what occurred in that whole debate. All right, so let's do this. All right, cool. You had the clean laws, things of that nature. You had the offerings. Right? You had drink offerings. Okay, you also had, there was a grain offering, there were meats, things of that nature done. You had the Levites. And by the way, this is very important here because this whole thing is orchestrated by Moses. All right, and if you understand Moses was the brother of Aaron. Okay, so Moses and Aaron, they're all a part of Levi. Okay, that's the tribe that they're a part of. Okay, so Levi orchestrated and facilitated, Most High via the tribe of Levi facilitated and orchestrated what we call the Old Covenant. This is the covenant that our fathers had broken. Okay, so what did this include? This include the written law by God, right, on the tables of stone, the 10 Commandments. And there was also added to it a book of the law, which included the feast that they were supposed to keep, the cleanliness laws, the food, things pertaining to the body, the offering, drinks, meats. It included the Levitical. Let me put that actually instead. And hopefully I don't spell this right. I mean wrong. Cool. Priesthood. All right. Levitical priesthood. All right. And it also entailed the people, basically what the people had to follow, the congregation, the church, if you will, and things that they had to follow when it comes to these things here. Okay, and also what they had to do for the Levites as well, because of course they had to give a tenth of what they had to the Levites, and the reason why they had to give a tenth to them because they had no inheritance in Israel. Right? We all know that. That's basic Bible. So getting on with it. So this is what is the Old Covenant. Now the New Covenant is something different. But before I go into the new Covenant, this is what the Old Covenant is. All right, so what we have is the Old Covenant. People gonna be like, man, this dude drawing and stuff, man. What he's drawing like this for? Nah, I think I'm somewhat of a teacher, man. So this is the way I teach. So let's say this is a man, right? This is a man, okay? And what a man has to do is he has to follow these things. This is the old thing of the rules of the old. He had to follow this. Okay, this is what they will call the letter, following the letter of the law. So basically, what this is and what this entailed was man had to follow everything that's written in the book of the law, as well as the 10 Commandments, and all that orchestrated via the law of Moses. So the intercessor between man and these things here was Levi, or I would say Aaron as well, being the high priest, right? And of course, Levi itself in general just being priest, right? So it was because of these groups, these people, the line of Levi, they were the mediators of this covenant. Basically, man's interaction with God, obeying his commandments, law, statutes, and commandments, was carried out by the Levites. So it was the Levites that carried out everything. It was the Levites that went into the Holy of Holies. These were the people that actually went in and did what was necessary in order for man to be right. We read later on the Hebrews verses, we understand, sorry, that's my phone, and also with the blood of bulls and goats. Because after all, it was the blood of bulls, he said. That's how Man, I'm trying to be like one of them the computer, what do they call, like computer training videos, man. That's what I'm saying. I did a lot of teaching and I did a lot of tutoring, not tutoring, but more so like I explain concepts in college. I grabbed the dry erase board, man, the work, and people, I like to explain things with a visual representation, so you won't get lost in what I'm saying in words, but you have a representation here of what I'm saying, so you can actually see like, oh, okay, this is what he's talking about. So let's look at this old covenant. So this is the covenant. So this is the old covenant. Actually, here, let's do old. Okay, this is the old covenant. This is what the old covenant included. It included the tables of stone, Mount Sinai. It had what was in the book of the law. The book of the law included these things. It had the feast days, had the cleanliness laws, had the food laws, had things pertaining to the bodies. It had the offerings, drinks, meats. We have the Levitical priesthood, who was there to associate everything within that priesthood. Basically in that covenant to make sure everything was carried out. And also we had the responsibility of the people or the congregation, or what we call Israel. So of course, that also includes the stranger who was able to join or sojourn with Israel, right? So in order for man, this person here, in order for man with his heart to do anything according to the Most High, he had to do it by the Levites. He had to do it according to the book, everything that was written. This is what he had to do. So this is where I get to the debate and what occurred between SoReal and Yahucanan. Is the model and representation that I'm getting ready to do this. But right now we're looking how things were done, as they say, in the Old Testament. Oh, okay, word. I'll go ahead and invite you. That's not a problem. All right, let's do. Here you go, bro. Okay, so this is what we had. So when it came to question, this is the way the debate went in my eyes and the way I viewed it. When you saw that Yahucanan was dealing with the topic or issue pertaining to that which is done now, the way things are now, which I will do a model representation. SoReal was arguing from the standpoint we see now. In his argument, let me give you a perfect example. Yahucanan would ask the question, or he'll make the statement saying, we know that in chapter 2, verse 14, it says, blotting out the handwriting of the ordinances. Right? So we have that in Colossians, right? 2 and 14, right? But then you could link that directly to, hope I abbreviated. I didn't abbreviate that right. This is Deuteronomy 31, right? And what does Deuteronomy 31 says? It talks about these things. The Deuteronomy 31 talks about these things right here. It says, and take the book of the law, which I read. In fact, since we're doing this live, it's best that I grab the actual verses so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. So let's go to Colossians chapter 2. I'm going to read that first. And we're going to see exactly the exchange here and what's being done. And I think a visual representation will be very good as far as organizing these things and see how this is. It says here, I'm starting at verse 12. I'm going to get to that in the next model. Wherein also ye are risen with him through the faith of the operation of God, who has raised him from the dead. Again, that's going to be in the next model. Being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you of all trespasses. What trespasses? Very key. Let's keep reading and see what this means. Blotting out the handwriting of the ordinances. Now let's stop right there. It says blotting out what? It says the handwriting of the ordinances that was against us. Now, when we look up the word ordinance, we have to be very key on what these words mean. When we look up the word ordinance, okay, the word ordinance itself actually means, and if I could, here we go. Ordinance, a piece of legislation enacted by a municipal authority. Now, if you don't know what the word municipally means, let's break that down. Relating to a city or town. Governing body. Ladies and gentlemen, what was the governing body of Israel? The Levites. Because remember, everything that was given to them on the appointments of the feast, we see clearly in scripture that they were there for the home, for the fatherless and the widow. Basically, it was like WIC was doing that. Think about it. When you get paid, who takes money from your check before anybody? Well, of course, healthcare, and there's pre-tax deductions that occur. But who takes money out of your check? It's the government. Why does the government take money out of your check? For roads, bridges, the municipalities, you have state tax, you have federal tax, because of the individuals who's taking care of the land that you're in, and also the law and all the things, municipal authority of the city. That's your water, your police, your fire departments, things of that nature. Tax. When it talks about ordinances, and this word ordinance, verse 14, about the handwritten ordinances given to a municipal authority. And when we look in ancient Israel and how that was set up, I have a beautiful book called the Society of Ancient Israel, which explains that model and how it really relied on the Levites and what they did, as well as the people. You can see that the municipal authority in Israel is the Levites. They were the ones who took care of the land. They were the ones who took care of this, because remember, they were also the doctors as well. There was instances where you will see where a person will have a sore or any type of sign of leprosy. You had to take it to a priest. He had to examine it, make sure everything was right. When there was a matter that came down to marriage or an authority on inheritance and things of that nature, we see this in Numbers. Of course, with the two women, when they approach Moses, it says, look, we have no male in our family to give an inheritance to from our father who passed. When that was the case, who did they go to? They went to a Levite. They went to Moses. And Moses was the one that actually worked out that thing for them. They were the municipal authority of the land. So where do we see this in the Old Testament? As I have it drawn on my board right now, we see this in Deuteronomy 31. Let's go to Deuteronomy 31 and look at this more closely. All right, so we're going to go to Deuteronomy 31. All right. And we're going to go down to verse, go down to, of course, we're talking about the covenant here. And just to hone in and key in that we're talking about the covenant, we're going to read verse 20. We're going to start from verse 20. It says here, it says, for when I shall brought them out of the land which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves and waxen fat, unto other gods and serve them and provoke me and break my covenant. This is the covenant. This is that covenant right here. This is the covenant right here. Those 10 commandments, the book of the law, the feast, the cleaning laws, the food, the body, the offering, the drinks, the meats, the Levitical priesthood, the people, the church, the congregation, all the strangers that joined themselves to that. Now let's keep going here. Here in verse 23, and he gave Joshua, the son of Nun, a charge and said, be strong and be of good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. And when Moshe, excuse me, and it came to pass when that Moshe had made an end of the writing of the words in this law of the book, and they were finished. So Moses made an end of the writing to the words that came in the book and were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, verse 25, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, now listen carefully to what he is saying here in verse 26. Take this book of the law and put it of the ark of the covenant for the Lord your God, that it may be there as a witness again. When I called into the show, notice, I don't know how many remember, if you remember this detail, I asked SoReal a question, or I didn't ask him a question, I actually made a statement. I said that we know the writings that was against us because of what it says here. His attempt to correct me, and I'm not trying to argue with him, he says that in Colossians 2 and 14, it says that blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. And comes against us, he said it's a legal term, which means to accuse. Well, it's a legal term when we look at verse 24. 26 and Deuteronomy 31 and 26. It says, for this shall be a testimony or a witness against thee. When a witness is against you, what is that? If you ever been to court, or if you've been in a situation where you had to been investigated or anything like that, a witness was an accuser against you. It said, nah, you're wrong. This is the guidelines. I caught you. Moses wrote was against them. The whole thing was against them technically. But what Moses wrote specifically, he said, let this be a testimony against you. Side of the ark. All right. So now that we got that covered, we see clearly what's being talked about here. All right. So let's get over to that other model. And then we're going to look at exactly how this fits in with everything else. So this is the old covenant here. What about the new covenant? What is that? What about this new covenant, right? Let's take a look. So this new covenant here, let's see what we got. What do we have? Let's first read what this new covenant is, right? Let's get some idea of what it is. And then what we're going to do is we're going to visualize it and see what this thing is. It's in entirety. We're going to draw this out. So let's go to 31 and 31. Of course, this is the famous verse. It says, behold, the days of the Lord shall come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant. All right. So what we got here? New covenant. Oops. Sorry, folks. New covenant. All right, let's see what we got. That I will make with the house of Israel after those days. He says here, I will make a new covenant. So I'm sorry. Let me reread that because I'm messing it up. It says, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. The covenant that I made with their fathers in that day that I took them by the hand and brought them out of the land of Egypt. Now, we just read that. This is what he's talking about. He says, not according to this, right? It's not this. A man through Aaron and Levi, mediating through the letter of the law, with the 10 commandments at his helm, which is what man is to be reconciled to, and then having the book of law, which is an accusation against them, which we just read in Deuteronomy 31. He says, not according to that. To our new model here that we're building up here. Let's see what this is all about. According to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break. We just read how they broke that, right? When we go back to Deuteronomy 31 and 20, it says, for when I shall brought them by the land, and which I swear unto the fathers that flow with milk and honey, they shall have eaten and filled themselves and waxen fat, and they will turn to other gods and serve them and provoke me and break my covenant. So that turning to other gods we see encapsulates 4 commandments of the 10 commandments. Place the things that they changed as far as the things that were done in the book in order for them to reconcile to the law, which was those things written down in the book of the law. So they shunned themselves upon that. They shunned God and they broke it. Okay. And he says, but this shall be the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after the days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts. Okay. So what we have here in this new covenant, the law of God that was on the ark. Left those on there. And let's take, we looked at before, right? So what were those things that we were discussing before that was in that old covenant? We had ordinances, we had feasts, which include meats, drinks. What we also had cleanliness. Right? We had the church, things that the congregation had to do as far as tithing, things of that nature. Or you say Israel. You also have let's see, ordinance, feast, meats, drinks, cleaning laws, Church of Israel, the priesthood. All right. Right, etc. We've been through this already, so we know what's in there. And we know that book of the law, okay? Basically, that book of the law included these things. It included all these things right here, as we see in Deuteronomy 31. Now, this was, it gets very interesting. He says this specifically: write it in their hearts and be their God, and they shall be my people. Now, what does this mean? So let's grab man, right? Let's grab man. Let's make a man here. We're making Adam. Adam here. All right, let's grab man here, man. All right, we have a man. Right. All right, so let's grab Adam, right? So this is what Yah says he's gonna do, right? He says he's gonna take these things and put them into our heart. But now, did he necessarily say that? Did he say that all of these things will be put into your heart? What we have to do in this New Testament, we have to now facilitate what exactly from this whole thing was put into our heart, which things were omitted and blotted out, and what were they? Now, we mentioned earlier from to that we have some things here. We have the Old Covenant, which include the Ten Commandments. We have all these things here. But in Colossians chapter 2 and 14, it says something very specific. It says, blotting out the handwriting of the ordinances. So, what are we getting rid of here? Anything that pertains to the ordinances. That the ordinances, we have the meats, we have drinks, cleaning laws. Was that part of the ordinance of the municipality of Israel? No, it was not. Church. Because what we're discussing now is tithing, things that nature, giving, and all that stuff. But that stuff, that's a totally different topic. It's a part of the topic, but it's a totally different topic. And we can do away also with the priesthood, because it's definitely not there anymore. We can cross out all those things in there. That's why when you go to Colossians chapter 2, let's go back there. We're going to see exactly what it says here. All right. All right. So let's go here. Colossians chapter 2, verse 14. Blotting out the handwriting was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. Police discussing. All right. Questionable. This one right here is questionable. Were nailed to the cross. These things were nailed to the cross. Okay. So we have to worry about these things anymore. Right. But look what it says here specifically, so it tells us exactly why. He says, but let no man therefore judge you in meat, right there, in drink, right here, in respect of a holy day. These are the feasts. Now, people will confuse and say, well, wait a minute. If it's saying Sabbath, why isn't it talking about these? Very simple. The Sabbaths that's being spoken about in the Old Testament were the meetings or the annual meetings that man had to keep, because this was the rehearsed Christ. So these were his Sabbaths. But this is the different rest than the one that is talked about in the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments rest or Sabbath was made for man. That is for us. So it is for us to follow. So when we look at this Sabbath here, where could we actually verify that? Let's go to Leviticus. Let's go to Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 28, I believe. Not 28. Let me see. Leviticus. Let's see here. There. Oh, a little bit. PC's kind of messing up here. All right, let's go to Leviticus 23 and 18. All right, let's see exactly what it says here. It says Leviticus 23 and 18, without blemish the first year. See, these are the Sabbaths. Now look what it says. For one bullock and 2 rams, they shall be a burnt offering unto the Lord, with their meat offering and their drink offerings, and an offering made by fire, a sweet savor. So when we go to Colossians, that's why Paul specifically says, let no man judge you in meat or in drink or respect of a holy day, of a new moon, or of the Sabbath days. Let nobody judge you in that. Why? Because these were the things that were written in the law of Moses, or the book of Moses, that was against us. Now, how do we know these things were in the book of Moses? Let's go to Kings. I think it's First Kings, chapter 2. We go. And it says in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 3, it says, and keep the charge of the Lord thy God to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and that whatsoever thou turnest thyself. So we see clearly that these things were included and are included into the law of Moses. So when we go back to Colossians, he says, blotting out the handwriting of the ordinances, meaning those things that were done by the municipal authority, which is Levi, that was contrary against us. These things were contrary against us. Why? Because Christ fulfilled these things. If you notice, the ordinances and everything that the Levites did, including with Aaron, they had to do when they offered themselves or holies. Okay? That Christ is now our high priest, Melchizedek. So let's see what the Levites failed at, and basically where Christ succeeded. And when we see, and not only that, but it was really impossible for them to do it. Nature in the way that they were made and what they were. And we're gonna get to them. My internet is like extremely slow. I may have to reboot my router or something. Let me see here. Hold on. Hold on, folks. My internet is, I'm still live, but I don't know what's going on in my browser. Apologize for the technical issues. Let me do this. God, I did the worst thing ever. Didn't even share the link. That right quick. Hold on, folks. Continue. Okay. Moment. I only got one person watching right now, really. So, I mean, I didn't even share the link with nobody, man. What was I thinking? Already put it there. Okay, hold on. I think I got this organized. Hold on a second. For stuff, I didn't even share the link. I ain't do nothing. All kinds of stuff up in here. All right, man. I think I shared this link out enough, man. I went through so much of this lesson. I didn't even realize I didn't share the link, man. And although I don't really do this YouTube stuff all that much, so it's not really built as a habit in my head. So I'll get it right one of these days, man. Days. All right. So I think I shared it out enough. All right, so I'm gonna get back into it. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to get back into it here. Still sharing it with 2 more sessions. All right, cool. Back to the lesson, I guess. All right, so as I was discussing before, let me just run through this a little bit more because I don't think anybody was in the room. I was first explaining the Old Covenant. And basically what I got mapped out here is basically what the Old Covenant is. Just to go through it real quick, we see that it's the 2 tables of stone. We see that it's the book of the law, the clean foods, the clean laws, the foods, the bodies, the offering, the drinks, the meats, the Levitical priesthood, the people or the congregation, which is known as the church. To follow this, and you have to follow this to the T, will be known as the letter of the law. And we did this via the Levitical priesthood or the Aharonic priesthood or high priest. Okay. So right here, what we have is man. And the way man was reconciled to these things is by the municipal order or authority of the Levites to the covenant, which included these things that we have here on the left. These things were mediated by the Levites, Aaron and their children, and also which was the giving of the law or the stone or the 10 commandments. Now, when we go into the new covenant, we're looking at or examining what things have changed in the new covenant. I read from Jeremiah 31, right? And went on from there to actually show that the things that are entered into the heart of man are those commandments. But then going back to Colossians chapter 2, we look at what things were blotted out as far as the handwriting of the ordinances, and we cross those things out the list. And crossing those things out the list, we get an idea of, which is here, what was nailed to the cross, and those things that were put into the heart or written on the heart. So far, what we have read in Colossians 2 is that the things that were written, that were taken out, were those things that were against us, in which we read in Deuteronomy 31 and 31 and 24. Thing that was against us was the things that Moses wrote. Now, what did Moses write? It's very simple. Let's go back to our first model. The things that Moses wrote, these things are here, the book of the law, right? These are the things that were against us. These were the things that they were following as a rehearsal in order to get into their minds exactly what it was that Christ had fulfilled and that was against us or testimony against us. All right, so moving on with this lesson, we're getting over to the New Testament. We're talking about these things in the New Covenant. What is included? So we do know that the book of the law, it is from the book of the law. We explained that ordinances basically means that those things carried out by the Levites. And we're going to move on from there. So what we did was cross out those things. So these are the things that are in question that are side conversations. Is it cleaning laws? Laws of cleanliness and things of that nature? I want to have a follow-up discussion with Mikael ben Israel because he did bring out an excellent point in regards to keeping ourselves clean. And what does that mean exactly to keep your body clean, which is the temple of the Holy Spirit? So that's something very key. All right, now let's go ahead and move on. So what we understand is that these are things that are entered to the heart of man. We have the 10 commandments, his commandments, these things right here. These things are entered into the heart of man. Because when we read in Matthew, what do we find? Let's go there right now and find in Matthew exactly what it is we're supposed to be following. So let's go to Matthew. All right, greatest commandments. Let's go to Matthew 22, 36 through 40. And it reads this. They asked him, they said, Master, which is the great commandments of the law? Jesus said unto them, Thou shalt love your God with all your heart, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. And the first is like unto the second is like unto the first. It says, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. For this hangs all the law and the prophets. Now we just explained what was the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets is these things right here. That was in that old covenant. Is these things right here. all the prophets, what hangs on those? It's two things. The first thing is love God with all the heart, all the soul, all the mind. And the second one is love your neighbor. Right? Love God, love your brother, love your neighbor, right? So these two things are on all up. Well, what are these two things linked to? What is this thing right here? It is, ladies and gentlemen, the 2 tables of stone, right? You had the first 4, which is, do not have any other gods before me. Any graven image or likeness that is in the heavens above and the earth beneath, or the waters under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down to them or serve them. Shabbat, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day of the Shabbat to the Lord. I shall not use the Lord's thy name in vain. I think I have 3 and 4 mixed up, but doesn't matter. Thou shalt not use the Lord, for the Lord would take his name in vain. Honor your mother and your father, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord thy God shall give thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Adultery. Thou shalt not covet. And thou shalt not bear false witness. So we have these things here, the 10 commandments. These things here, if you notice, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Is this in the 10 commandments? Sure is. It is the first 4. These pertain to loving God. Now, you have the final 6, 5 through 10. I'm sorry. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. So this is right here. We have the final 6. These pertain to loving your brother or loving your neighbor. Now this, you see this clear in the scriptures. So what is it here that the Bible's trying to teach us? Now let's go take a look to this point. We explained what the old covenant was, and we know that they had to get there by mediation of the Levites and the Aaron, the Aaronic high priest. And we know that there was a lot of things included in the law. We know that there was the tables of stones, there were the feast days, the cleaning laws, the food, the body, the offering, the drinks, the meat, the Levitical priest tells them what they had to do, right? But now the question is this: now that we establish what's being written upon our hearts, okay? How do we get to this point? What does this mean? How does this work? Let's go right into it. So the model here. We have to get into problem. What was the problem in the first place, right? What was the reason? So the first covenant was broken, of course. But was there something inefficient about that first covenant? Was there something inefficient about what we see here, other than my organization skills and how I'm drawing all over this thing and confusing y'all like it's an etch a sketch? But what is the problem with this? What is this problem? Well, we know that there's a problem with this. This is the problem right here. This right here, folks. The heart. Now, in this old covenant, men were told what to do. They had to do things by action in all ways to try to fulfill their own righteousness and what they had to do. They had to follow every single one of these points in order to obtain righteousness, which they couldn't really do in the first place. They had to follow every single one of these points on both of the law and the law. They had to keep the whole thing. Not only that, but this had to be right and this had to be right. And not only do you have to do the whole thing, bro. So do you see the difficulty in that, especially when you got an issue with this, right? It's carnal. That's the problem with it. The problem with that heart is carnal. Now, what does the Bible say, or the New Testament, in Paul's examination of the man's mind? What does that mean? Sorry, a little orange slice there. But what does that mean? He says that we know that the carnal mind, let's get to that. He says we know that the carnal mind, right, is enmity against God. So it doesn't mix well with God. Let's look at it specifically and see what it says, and we can get an actual explanation of what this is saying. This is in Romans 8. We're going to jump around Romans a lot because Romans is really going to tie in. Paul's is doing experimentation. He's like looking at this thing, telling us what exactly is going on. So let's see here. It says Romans 8 and 6. It says, for to be carnally minded is what? Death. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. He says, because of the carnal mind is enmity. What does enmity mean? It means the state of feeling or being actively opposed or hostile to someone or something. Wait a minute. That's the problem we see here with this whole thing. What is the point in following all of these laws when the heart, the very thing, and of course, when we talk about the heart, we're actually talking about the mind, right? But that thing right there is enmity against the law itself. How can you serve God? It's enmity against God. It has a state of feeling. It's actively opposed at all time by its nature to be hostile towards what? God. It goes on to say, for it is not subject to the law of God. What does it mean to be subject? Now, we know when we hear the term a king, right? So subject means in the position to serve or in the position to be under. For it is not subject to the law of God, meaning not able to serve or even be there, nor indeed can be. Paul is telling you that this mind cannot even do it. Not that it cannot, it can do it. It's not like, well, can we make it work? No, it can't even do it. The carnal mind, keep in mind, carnal mind, it's inefficient. It just won't work. It needs to happen. Something's got to give. Okay, so let's get back to the model here that we're looking at. So let's look at the points that Paul made. He says that it's enmity against the law of God. That's right, Aleph and Tav. It's not subject to it, can't serve it, nor indeed can be. It can't even do it. So this carnal mind is not able to serve this law, no matter what is in nature, right? Now, let's get over what's going on, Madon. Shalom, man. How you doing, brother? All right, brother. That's what's up. So let's get into this right quick. So this is a problem with the old covenant. Sure. Righteousness of the law, all this, but look how complicated this is. I mean, goodness gracious. Could you imagine? Now, we kind of getting a little bit, it says, but we have the mind of Christ, right? And we can understand the things of Christ. We start to get an understanding from God's perspective what's going on here. He's like, man, this being right here, he can't do it. I need to make some changes here. I need to do something with all of this in order for this to fit to the new model that I'm gonna put, the new covenant I'm gonna make with you, because the old covenant your fathers break. But I gotta make it better. I gotta make it efficient. All right. Let's get over to it. So let's do this. So here's the question we have to ask ourselves, right? A couple of questions. Okay, let's do. All right, that's what's up, Madon. That's what's up. If let's use our minds here. Let's use our brains here. This one question. If the carnal mind is enmity against God, it's not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be, then what is the opposite or logical argument that follows that? What about the spiritual mind? Right? What about that? What about, can it be subject to the law of God? Can it be subject to the law of God? He already expresses one point, right? He says the carnal mind cannot do it, but the spiritual mind, can it do it? The point will be this, to ask the very basic question. If the carnal mind was enmity against God and cannot serve the law of God, neither indeed could be subject to the law of God, then what does that say about the spiritual mind? And if the spiritual mind can do it, what will be the point in saying that the law has been done away with, or that it cannot be served, but yet God equipped us with something in order to serve it? In other words, if you just drive on pavement all your life, why do you need a four-wheel drive package? If you don't plan on towing any cars, why you need a tow package? If you don't want to fend the wind in your face, why you get a convertible? So we see by design, if something was built or set up or meant do something planner in the first place. You have the 4-wheel drive package so you can drive off-road. You have the tow package so you can tow another car, and you have the convertible because you can feel the wind in your face. Point in God changing us from this to this if the point is not to serve this. Makes sense, right? Because what would be the point in changing us from what we have above here, this, down to this, if the point is not to serve this? The very purpose of what was done in the beginning was because of this. And its inability to serve this, and this, and this, and this, and this. But it was against us. See, not only did this have to change, but also these had to change. There has to be compatibility on both sides. So when we go back to the new covenant and what was done away with, we see that there's now the tearing down. When you remodel, you tear down, right? Tear this down. You have to go in here and say, okay, what's wrong here? I got a problem here, and I got a problem here. So what God starts saying is this: I'm going to blot out through my son and fulfill all those things that was against y'all. I'm giving y'all a discount. This and all the things that pertains to the nature in these things here, and I'm going to put them in this thing here. Now, before I could put them in there, I have to change that. Because, again, heart, mind, okay? Heart, mind. Let's go back. Mind is carnal. Do this unless we change this. Can't do it. So what do you got to do? You got to change this. Now, how do we change that? Very good. Let's see how we could actually change. We're going to get into first the explanation of this phenomenon that goes on within our bodies. Look in depth on what it is that's being said here, because it's very key. Do this. I'm going to read Romans 7, and a lot of brothers that know me, they know that I love Romans 7. I always go to Romans 7 for a lot of things. What I'm going to do, I'm going to break it down for you in a visual representation, again, like I'm doing. Not an explanation from voice, to you to hear it, because a lot of people, they're not. I'm going to say this, a little sidebar thing. I found that African Americans or black folks, our people, a lot of us, we learn differently. Like I'm finding with a lot of black people, they actually learn actively and visually. Whereas other people, they may be able to learn auditorily, by auditory, or by different types of explanations, right? There's the visual learner. There's the learner that understands concepts and shapes. So it's a difference when you show somebody in this manner. Actually like, I see it. I see what you're saying. That's why the teacher, he goes up there with the chalkboard and does his thing. So that's interesting. So sure, I may not be saying anything different from what a pastor might be saying or anything like that. A bit differently because I am implying that you follow the 10 Commandments. I think that this will be a lot easier for people to understand and grasp when they look at it from this point of view. All right, so let's get into this. All right. All right, so where were we? We were reading Romans 7. And what we're going to do, we're going to get into the contentions between these two minds, or the differences between these two minds, and why there's such a thing. Why does this problem exist in the first place? So let's go into Romans 7. I'm going to read here. Not, brethren, for I speak to them that know. All right. How that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he lives. Which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so as long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then, if while her husband lives, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from the law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. I got to do it. Okay, I got to give you an example of that. So a woman is saying, people are like, man, Kev, you don't need to explain this, man. We don't understand. Yeah, but some people don't understand, man. Let me just rock and go through to one another, right? So it says, according to the law, as long as these two are wed, They're together as one unit. If she steps out of that marriage and gets with another man, she's going to be called an adulteress. This one right here. Wherefore, my brethren, read verse 4, become dead to the law of the body of Christ. Now, it's talking about dead. Who has to die? This dude has to die. Because once he dies, she's able to marry that other person, and she's no longer considered an adulteress. So it says that ye should be married to another, even to him who was raised from the dead, that we should bring forth fruit unto God. What is this talking about? It's talking about Christ. So now we had to die to something, or something had to die. But the thing about it is that it was explaining in the context, Paul was explaining in the context of the law and how it worked, that it was the woman who was called an adulteress. The reason why he used the woman as being called the adulteress is because this is the standpoint of the church. Because one, the church is described as being the bride of Christ. That if you know, maybe another topic is that adultery only applies to the woman. And if you notice throughout the Bible, men were the ones who were allowed to marry other women. Unfortunately, I will say that. Not making a feminist statement, but I will say that's kind of messed up. But we know in the New Testament that to be a true deacon, you have to be a husband of one wife. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Please have one wife. And then you see that the wife is the one that if she leaves and try to marry another, like us or Israel, Israel committed adultery, or she was called the whore because she went around with other nations and did that. But that's another topic. But we see that the husband had to die, right? But in this case, we had to die. Because look what it says here. For when we were in the flesh, the motions of sins, which are by the law, did work in our members to bring forth fruit unto death. We are delivered from the law, that being dead wherein we were held, that we should now serve in the newness of the spirit and not with the oldness of the letter. So what is it saying here? It's saying that we were once married to this, right? It was chained to the book, and ordinances, diet, what? Righteousness, right? All this is keep our righteousness. We were married to that, right? So when Paul is explaining that marriage scenario, he's saying that somebody got to die in order to be free from that. So here comes Christ. Boom. He's like, what up? Christ died. And then we say, oh, but I'm married to this thing, this old thing, right? I'm married to this carnal, I have this carnal mind here. How do I get rid of this? When you die with Christ, with him, and now you're free now. Because since you died, you now free. So now that you're free from your old husband, guess what you're free to do now? You're allowed to marry now. Get married and you're changed. Because when you die, guess what? You're raised back to life. And when you raise back to life, you're different now. You're a new creature. I should be bringing out a lot of scriptures on this, but I'm assuming that people already know a lot of this stuff. It's like basic Bible. Go ahead and go through everything, just in case people are like, you know. So let's do this. This. It's actually in Romans 6, but I want to pull up the exact verse here instead of searching around and everything here. Let's go to verse 7. We're going to go to Romans 6 and 7. It says this exactly. Let's go to Romans 6 and just read this in entirety. That way, it can get boring when I'm pausing and trying to look for scripture. I should have had this all lined up, but this is more of an impulse video. As you can see, it's a follow-up to a debate, more so just doing teaching rather than really speaking on the situation and the details between SoReal and Yahucanan. But I'm in agreement with LaRon that there's more understanding and things that need to come in the light before we can even make an attempt to even critique. And it's like kind of like, you know, I wouldn't call them children at all because there's much that we all should learn. But I would say that there's more understanding needs to be brought in, because honestly, the two brothers really, they were talking past each other in a sense. So, okay. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we then live any longer therein? In other words, if you look at what he says in chapter 7, he says, how thou sins should we even be, how if we're dead to it, how can we be married to it? How can we live any longer in that? We shouldn't even have that mentality, even adhering ourselves to that. Know ye not that so many of us who are baptized into Christ, meaning baptized means to submerge, to dip, died with him. Christ were baptized into his death, where therefore we are buried with baptism into death. Christ was raised up from the dead. That's what I talked about here. This little blue man on the far right. For the Father, even so we shall walk in newness of life. The newness of life. What is that? We're going to get into that. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, which I'm saying, the woman had to die so she could be free from that old thing. What is that old thing? How complicated that is, man. All right. We shall walk in the newness of life, that if we've been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. For he that is dead is free from sin. Now, if we be dead with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dieth no more, death have no more dominion over him. That's very key. That gets exactly into what is the improvement of this covenant. So please keep Romans chapter 6, verse 9 in mind. In fact, let me make the note. 9. I think it's a colon for verses. All right, so let's get into this. So let's go back to 7, right? And we're leaving portion in whereas the woman was married to the old law. So let's go here. It says, for but sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of conspicuance. For without the law, sin is dead. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. Why? Because it was a testimony against you. And the commandment which was ordained in life, I found to be unto death. Occasion by the commandment deceived me and slew me. Wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and just and good. And that which is good make death unto me? God forbid. So, okay, so what he's saying here is that, what's this? That we're divorcing from, not divorcing from, I wouldn't use the term divorce, but I would say die to. What's this thing here set up for death? No, it wasn't set up for that. For we know, we see here, it says, was then that which made good make death unto me? God forbid. But sin, that it might appear sin, working death in me, sin is in the heart. Let's read that. Where can we find that example? That sin, that is what sin is. Let's go to James. And when we go to James, we're going to go to. Okay, we're going to read it. James chapter 12. I'm sorry, chapter 12. We're going to go to James chapter 1, verse 12. Let's read. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord had promised to them that love him. Let no man say that when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. Notice the language he's using here, and it's very key. Paul agrees that the law was not set up to kill us, but it was life and spiritual. But it was sin that was in him that caused him to die to the law. Now notice that the law, which is the words of God that came on Mount Sinai, that he wrote in the finger with his finger on the stone. Paul said that the law didn't do it, but the law was in you. Look what he's saying here. What I would do is I will replace tempted of God, his commandments. Let's reread it with that in mind. Let no man say that when he is tempted, I am tempted by the words or commandments of God. For God cannot tempt it with evil, he tempt to eat any man. So along what Paul says, you understand that it wasn't the law that did it. They said they call the law letter, the killer, because of the interaction. But the law doesn't do that. Let's look at what it does here. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away by his own lust and enticed. What is that? Go to right here. This is what James is talking about. He's talking about that right there. Not the law, but this scenario. This whole scenario right here. The carnal mind. Let's keep reading. For God cannot be tempted with evil nor tempted. I'm sorry, let's go down to where I was. Then it says, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away by his own lust and enticed. And when lust hath conceived, it bring forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bring forth death. Now, what is sin? Sin is the transgression of the law. Let's go back to our first model here. We know that man's heart was carnal. Act with this whole thing in the old covenant, the tables of stone, the book of the law, the feast, the clean laws, the food, the body, the offering, the drinks, the meats, the priesthood. He couldn't do it. Not only because we revealed about the carnality of his heart and his mind that he's not able to do it, that situation brings forth sin. And sin is him breaking this. Okay? And when sin is finished, it brings forth what? Death. This is when we get to saying that the law is a killer. When he says the letter killeth and these things like that. Because of the letter of man's heart, that's what kills them. Because remember, God told Adam something specific. He says, for the day that you eat thereof, this day you shall surely die. Not later, not a minute from now. He said, this right at that moment, you will die. So what happened? Paul looked at God's commandment. Adam looked at God's commandment, or Eve looked at God's commandment. The serpent came. He beguiled her. He questioned the commandment. Say, really? Did he say that? Really? But I do want to have my eyes open. She gave to her husband, and he took and he ate. What happened? Was it God's commandment that tempted them? But what was the temptation? It was in the heart. So what happened was he said, boom, they died. They were disconnected. Boom. That's why God says, Adam, where art thou? Where are you? This is gone now. This connection is gone. All right, so let's keep going here. So basically what we explained there is that that's the problem with man's heart. Now let's get back into Romans 7, back to where we were, and we can get into it. So he says in verse 14 in Romans 7 says, for we know that the law is spiritual. Carnal. Let's see here. Okay, we got some people watching now. It says, for we know the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. Sold under sin. For that which I allow not, for that which I would not, that I do not. But what I hate, that I do. You're not in control, bro. That's why, Paul, I'm telling you, you're not in control. Paul knows this. He's telling us, yo, you're not in control. If you ain't got that spiritual mind, you're not in control. Specifically here, because even with his mind or his conscience, because we know that the conscience bears witness. Where do we say that? We have to really understand what Paul is saying here. Let's go to Romans. 2 and 15. It says here, which show the work of the law. Well, actually, let's go back a little bit. Let's go to Romans. Man, Romans is a heavy book. I'm telling you, as a believer, I would implore every Christian to read Romans, man. Because Romans it's a freaking aluminum bat. Like, forget, it's a maple bat, man. That thing will crack over your skull like nothing else. Let's go to 2 and 15, man. It's 14. For when the Gentiles have not the law. Now notice what he says here. He says, for when the Gentiles which have not the law. What does the Gentiles not have? The law. What is the law? This law, statute, and commandments of the Most High. They don't have them. By nature, do the things contained in the law. These, having not the law, are a law unto themselves. Like, people read that and they kind of read past that. They're like, oh, they have the law to themselves. No. Look what it is that they're noticing. Show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness in their thoughts, the meanwhile accuse or else executing one another. So it's the conscience that's able to witness these things, regardless if you have the law or not. It's there. Now let's go back to Romans 7 and see what it is. What's going on here? For he says, for I know the law is spiritual, but I'm carnal, sold under sin. allow not, and what which I would not, I would hate, but that I do. But if I do that which I would not, I consent that the law is good. Now, how is he witnessing that the law is good? Because he's noticed doing something that is wrong. He noticed something he's doing that is wrong if he doesn't have the law. His conscience. He says, now then it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is my flesh. Notice the words he's using here. Dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me. Means to do it. Not the means, I'm sorry, the thought to do it. But to perform it, meaning the means, I find the good, I find not. That's why we have the mind. That's why we need the new mind. He just highlighted another point. To do it, that what did Christ say? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Why did he say that? He said that to them. He said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Paul is saying, I find the will, how to perform it, which is good, I find not. So he's also saying, in a sense, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. But what is the spirit they're talking about? They're talking about their conscience. It says here, for the good that I will not, but the evil I will not, that I do. Now, if I do not that what I will not, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwell in me. I find in a law, not a law like the law of Moses or anything. People always, when they hear law, they quick to run to Leviticus or something. What he's talking about is a system of rules in a particular way that regulates actions or enforces something. He notices a reaction to something. He says, I find in a principle, because the other translations, I believe, is called principle. He said, I find in a principle that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law or principle in my members, warring against the principle of my mind and bringing me into captivity, the law of sin, which is in my members. This is this right here. Enslavement, that connection, not to the law itself that is bad, but to if you and your husband or your wife was married to one another, y'all together, it does feel like prison if y'all aren't compatible. It's like if you're locked in a marriage and you're like, man, I know my husband's a good man, but you ever been in those situations? You've been in a relationship with somebody and y'all are together, but y'all just not compatible. So this is, you feel like you're a slave to the situation. You don't really feel. So what is God saying? Hey, just don't be together, be together. Love. Don't just be together and be with them and be incompatible and unhappy, because you and the law can't exist together. Be in love, be compatible. So what is he doing? He made us compatible. Let's see what it says here. But I see another law of my members, which is against the law of my mind, and bringing me to captivity, the law of sin, which is in my members. Oh, wretched man that I am. This man right here. And who shall deliver me from this body of death? I thank God through Christ Jesus our Lord, so that with the mind I may serve the law of God, but with the flesh, the law of sin. Now that's very deep. Because he is saying here now that he thanks Christ for some reason, and we already went to that reason. People should know by now, this far in the lesson, that when we go back to this right here, these things being able to be put in the heart and in renewness in the mind, us becoming a new creation, that which we read out of Romans 6, right? We read out of Romans 6, and we're looking at the knowing that we be raised to the dead, dieth no more, but dieth has no more dominion, death have no more dominion over him. That's one thing we thank Christ, that our old man is crucified with him, and we shall not serve sin, or that we is dead and free from sin. That's what we thanking him for, that we are buried with him and baptized into death. That, like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so that we shall walk with him in the newness of life. This is why he's thanking Christ. He said, I thank Christ that with the mind, I'm able to serve the law of God, but with the flesh, the law of sin. What is the two greatest commandments, ladies and gentlemen? The first is to love your God with all your heart, all thy soul, and with all thy mind. Notice the connection here. He says exactly in Jeremiah 31:31 that he was going to take his laws and put them into our hearts. which is the exact place where our soul, our mind, and our heart are all intertwined into one. So serving God is with these things. And then the second part is love your neighbor as you love yourself. Let's move on. So this is where we at so far. I'm going to do a quick recap, and then we're going to get into the next part of this model. We've noticed in the beginning that in the Old Covenant, dang, look how complicated that is. The Old Covenant, we got the laws, we got the book of the law, we got the feast, the clean laws, the food, the body, offering, drinks, meats, Levitical priesthood, the people, the church. We had the letter of the law, which is all these things in it and what it contains. We had the judgments, we had the sacrifices, which is all those things that pertain to us in the book of the law. We had the Levitical priesthood, and we had the Aharonic priesthood, and then we had a man with a carnal heart. And a lot of Old Testament people like, that's all we need. Nah, my man. Yeah. It's like, you know how your mechanic look at it like, you need a tune-up. You need a tune-up, man. Come on, man. This ain't gonna work. Improvise. God planned it out. Boom, 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 boom. Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of that. Let me change this. All this stuff I'm gonna fill and write on the cross. Boom, got that. I'm gonna take these. That this is how you please me. Because we know faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. And no man can please God without faith. Is that which he gave us from the beginning. As he says in Peter, I write to you no new commandment, but that which you have heard from the beginning. We take this and we put it right in the heart. Boom. Because of that creation, that newness. As it says in Romans 6, we become a new creature. So now that we know a new creature, we're now that new wineskin. Now that we know a new creature, we're now that new tunic. So that when we do put a good patch in that thing, it won't rip the tunic. And we could put the new wine into the new wineskins because they won't burst. And you won't waste them both. So we had to become new wine. We had to be able to contain that which he's able to write on our hearts. And you had to be compatible for it. It's very powerful. So let's get back over to what we were going to conclude with now. So this is where we're at. And then now we're knowing why the change had to happen, because of the difference between the carnal mind and the spiritual mind. And the key question that I asked was, if the carnal mind is enmity against God, was against the law of God, and neither indeed can be, then why give us a spiritual mind? Why give us that which is compatible and capable of serving the law of God if the intent is not to serve the law of God? Simple. I think that's simple logic right there. Now we're going to get into another example. And people, I know y'all tired of this. If y'all can hit the like button if y'all watching or whatever, it'd be very cool if you did. Also, if you could holler, if say, hey, not to pat me on the back, me okay, anything, to pretty much let me know that this thing is working, and then it's going well or whatever. So that's it. That's my 2 cents. All right, so 1 second, please. Right here. Okay. Appreciate that, Madon. That's what's up, man. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to get to another part. So we went through this parts. We went through the old covenant. We went through changes that need to be made to the new covenant. Now we got into the introduction of implementing the change. Implementation is a term that we use in IT a lot. And basically what it means is to take that which is a model or a new system or construct and to implement it into an existing model or construct, right? So implementation, right? What are we talking about when we say implementation, right? We need to implement this new man, or we need to implement this new creation to fit in now with this new covenant that he created. It's like Lego blocks. You have the one end, which in IT we use the term female end, right? You know, you have a plug, you have the female end, and then you have what's called the male end, right? And of course, they need to plug in, right? They need to get in. Don't please, no vulgar statements, but this is just a basic concept. So implementation, right? All right, so now we're going to talk about the interaction in another view of when it comes to implementation. Let's go to 2 Corinthians. So 2 Corinthians. And we're going to go to chapter 3. Corinthians 3 it's basically another take of Romans, really. We're going to see something that happens here. And then we're also going to see an example of something. I'm going to explain a concept that occurs in the Old Testament. And then we're going to see an example of this thing actually in Romans 3. Now, it was something interesting that was brought out during one of the Debate Talk for You discussions. And a brother actually said something that really rang in my heart a lot. He says, the prophecy or the foretelling of the two covenants was shown when Moses went up to the mountain twice. And this is what he said that was so crazy. Moses came down with 2 tables of stone, right? Now, what did he do with that first table of stone? When he came down, the children of Israel were sinning. They made a calf, they made Baal, right? And then eventually they died. Killed them. Right? What did he do with those tablets? When he came down, he was like, nah, man, forget that. They don't deserve that. So he took those tablets and he threw them. The earth opened up. They died. They ordered some of the Levites to be like, kill these cats, get rid of them, this, that, and the other. Bad. But then Moses was sent back up. He went back up to the mountain. Right? He said, yo, y'all got to do better than this. Goes back up to the mountain. And he grabs it again. Of stone. But this time, excuse me, dang. But this time, it has a glory on them. Right? And because of this, Moses a veil over his face. And the brother, what he said on the Debate Talk for You video, he said, you notice how the first ones killed them and the second ones glorified them. But it was a glory that they was not ready for. These were the tables that he kept. Let's go into 2 Corinthians chapter 3. We're going to see this more into explanation and why this matters. This is what he begins to say. Chapter 3, verse 1. It says, do we begin again to commend ourselves, or need we, as some others, epistles of commendation to you, or letters of commendation to you? Ye are our epistle written in our hearts, known and read of all men. For as much as ye are manifestly declared to be the epistle of Christ ministered by us, written not with ink. Notice that. He said ink. What was written in ink? What Moses wrote. Colossians 2. Blotting out the handwriting. Written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. Not in tables of stone, but what? But in fleshly tables of the heart. And such trust have we through Christ to Godward, meaning going towards God or Godward, like they say onward or forward or anything like that. It means to go towards God, Godward. So it says, such trust have we through Christ. Now notice he's saying, see, you got to read these words carefully. Notice he's saying that the trust or faith is through Christ to go to what? To reconcile to the Father. This law, buddy. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think that anything of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God, who also hath made us able ministers of the New Testament. Wait a minute. What is this New Testament? We're going to get into that. You need to read Hebrews 9. All right. Not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter, Colossians 2, Deuteronomy 31:24, killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. But if the administration of death, written and engraven in stones, was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses. It's not talking about this first one that killed. It's talking about the second one he brought down, right? Was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses for the glory of his countenance, which glory was to be done away. How shall not the ministration of the Spirit be rather glorious? For if the ministration of the condemnation be glory, much more doeth the ministration of the righteousness exceed in glory. For even that which was made glorious had no glory in this respect, by reason of the glory that excelleth. For if that which was done away was glorious, much more shall remaineth is glorious. Seeing that we have such hope, we use the great plainness of speech. Let's go on and read this, see what it says here. Not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look to the end of that which was abolished. Now, what is it? Now, the Bible says that Christ is the end of the law. Now, when we look at that word "end" there, it doesn't. Yahucanan actually brought this up in debate, which is a very good point. It's a word that has the root telos, and when we look at telos, telos doesn't mean in the end as far as exterminating or executing, but basically that which is finished or the end goal. That's why it says faith in Christ with towards Godwardness or to be Godward. But their minds were blinded. Their minds are blinded. So let's see what the law is doing here. We got the law. It's got this glory. This glory, right? Man, my work is emailing. This glory made man blind. Right? Made man blind. It's like, what the heck is going on here? You know? Made man blind. He had to wear a veil, man. The veil over our heads. Right? That man was blinded. When he looked at that law, when he saw that, he couldn't see. It blinded him. Now look what it says here. Seeing that the so the plainness of speech, not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, and the children of Israel could not look to them was abolished, but their minds were blinded. This is what's blinded is the mind. That's what's blinded. Because of this, the glory of that law. Right? He's making a distinction here. That the children of Israel could not steadfastly look into the end of that which is abolished. Now, what is the end? The end. Now, remember, the root word of that Greek word is telos, the end. So he cannot see at the end what's beyond that. He can't see what the law is. He's just blinded by the glory that is in the law. But their minds were blinded, for until this day remaineth the same veil untaken away from the reading of the Old Testament, which veil is done away in Christ. So what did Christ do? He took that veil off. Nevertheless, when it shall turn to the Lord, the veil shall be taken away. Now the Lord is that Spirit, which the Spirit of the Lord is. There is liberty. Now he's saying that glory of that Spirit. The Lord is that Spirit. Now hold on. This man now can see. Right? Get that sad face off, man. Right? He's able to see. He's able to see. But now when he sees, what does he see at the end of that? What does he see at the end of that? It's going to be real key. Let's take a look at this and see what he sees here. It says here, nevertheless, it shall turn to the Lord. The veil shall be taken away. Now the Lord is that Spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. There's none of this no more. There's none of this. There's liberty now to look at it with this, to obey this. There's none of this. There's liberty. We ain't got this no more. We dealing with it. This. All right, now let's see what it says here. Now the Lord is that Spirit. Already read that, but we all with an open face. Meaning what? What is open face, folks? That veil is dropped. We're not wearing that thing no more. Useless. We don't need a veil. No more veil, right? Beholding, he says, but we with an open face, beholding as in a glass. Oh my goodness. So let's see here. Let's grab this down. Right? We got this man here now. Looking in the mirror, right? Yeah, no, I'll be getting in with this thing, man. He's looking at himself. Right? He's looking at himself now. So beholding the face of the glory of the Lord. But what is he? Okay, think about it. Let's look at what the concept is. It's very deep. Now, when that veil is removed, he's able to see the end of the law. He could look beyond it now, right? He looks at it now. The law is no longer blinding him. He's looking in a glass now. He sees Christ. Because remember, it says the Lord is that spirit. And where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all with the open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed from the same image from glory to glory, even as the spirit of the Lord. So now, he's able to see that. He can look into that. Right? Where is this else expressed? Let's go to James. I'm going in tonight, y'all. Hopefully. Hopefully I'm going in tonight. Yo, hit that like button, y'all, man. For real. What's up, man? All right, let's get this in. Let's go to James. And we're going to go to. All right. Let's go to verse 18. It says here, for his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be kind of the first fruits of his creatures. Now, he said the first fruits of our creatures. Where is this at? We just read Romans 6, right? Romans 6 and 9. Becoming that new creature means to die with him. Romans 7. Dying with him means to be divorced, or not divorced. I keep using that term, but to die to the old covenant or that oldness of the law. Now that we die, we're raised back to life. And now we can be married to that without being called adulteress. So by law, you're able to join yourself that which is new. We know that that which is new were those things that were blotted out, which the handwriting and ordinances, and taking those things that pertain to the greatest commandments and putting them into our hearts and our minds. Okay? So when we see that that has to change. But in order for that to go into our heart and mind, there had to be a change from the carnal, as we see above, down to the spiritual. Now to the law. So let's look at what this says here. It says, and I'm in James chapter 1, and we're going to go to verse 20. I'm sorry, let's go to verse 19. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore lay apart all filthiness, superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word. Wait a minute. Engrafted word. What does engrafted mean? Engrafted means another term for graft. What does graft means? Graft means to join, to put on, to make two things go together. Now, we know that he's going to take this and graft it to what? Our hearts. So he's saying, therefore lay apart all filthiness, superfluity of naughtiness, and receive the meekness. Now, what does meekness mean? Meekness means a condition of being meek, a condition of being submissive. Now, didn't we read in Romans 8 that the carnal mind is unable to be submissive to the law of God? So, and then we read that by logic, the necessity for one's mind to be subject to the law of God, or in this case, meekness in James' words, is to become spiritual. And what will be the point in something being compatible and capable of following the law of God and say that the law has been done away with? So then we get to the word engrafted word, the 10 Commandments of God. And it says here, which is able to save your souls. How? But be ye doers of the word. That's how. And not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Verse 23. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. Folks, isn't that what we just read in 2 Corinthians chapter 3? that once the veil is removed with the newness of the mind, we're able to see to the end of the law, which is the Spirit of Christ, which is a glass. So when we look at the commandments now, it no longer blinds us. It corrects us. How? Let's keep reading. For he that beholdeth himself goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whosoever looketh at the perfect law, so he says, for any be hear of the word and not a doer, he is like a man beholding his face in a natural glass. For he do beholdeth himself, he looks at himself, right? He sees he got something hanging from his nose. He sees he got something hanging from his mouth. This dude's beard ain't trimmed, or he's not cleaned up. He got stuff in his ears or whatever. You know, all kinds of stuff. The dude is just not, he's just, you know what I'm saying? He got crust in the eye and everything like that, right? Let me get in here so y'all can know what I'm saying, man. Right? So basically, if a person who is a hearer of the word of God and not a doer, he's like this man right here. He's looking right into that image, that glass, and he's seeing what manner of man he is, and he forgetteth what manner of man he was, and go along his way as though nothing's wrong. It says, but whoever looketh to the perfect law of liberty. What is 2 Corinthians chapter 3? It says that perfect law of liberty is who? It's Christ. It says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17, for now the Lord is that spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So when we go back over to James, right, it tells us that, but whosoever look into the perfect law of liberty, which is the 10 commandments, which is, when we look at that, the end of it is Christ, and continue with therein, he is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work. This man shall be blessed in his deed. So what he's saying is this: when we look at ourselves in the law of liberty, we have 10 things. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those things pertaining to God. And then we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those things pertaining to man. Okay? And when we look at these things, we should be, in all points, making sure that we're cleaning ourselves up. You know, do I have anything in my eye? Do I have anything on my nose? Do I have something here? Do I need to shave? Right? Do I need to get these? Do I need to clean myself up? Do I need to clean myself up? Do I need to look at this perfect law of liberty and clean myself up? So when we look at that and continue with therein, meaning continue to look, who gets up every morning, get ready for work, and just look at the mirror once a week? Nobody. Right? But whosoever look into the perfect law of liberty and continue with these, continue with therein, he be not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work. This man shall be blessed in his deed. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridle not his tongue, but deceive his own heart, this man's religion is in vain. Pure religion, undefiled before God the Father, is this: to visit the fatherless, the widows, and the from the world. How do you keep yourself unspotted from the world? By following his commandments. What does it say in 1 John chapter 5? Let's go to it. Let's go to 1 John chapter 5. It says something very key here. It says, whoever believes that Jesus Christ is born of God, and everyone that loveth him, that begat, all loveth him also that is begotten of him. What does that begotten mean? We have to understand, we just went through the lesson that to be begotten of him, or to be created or be of him, meaning that we had to die with him, and we had to be resurrected with him, and we had to become a new creation. And then we go from the carnal mind to the spiritual mind, a spiritual mind that's capable of serving the law. We serve the law, and that's how we do it. Now, let's continue on and see if this is true. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. What does it mean by grievous? Grievous means what? Fierce, serious, hard. What was against us, folks? Look at this whole covenant. What was against us? What was severe? Let me eat the orange slice and let y'all think about that. What's the problem? We got a lot of problems when we look at this sheet, folks. We got commandments in stone. We got the book of the law. We got feasts to keep. You got lambs to slaughter that had to be perfect. You had foods you had to eat. You had the body you had to keep up. You had the offerings you had to have. You have the drinks. You have the meats. You have the priesthood. You have marriages, cleanliness, all types of judgments as far as stoning people. You had offerings that you had to give out of your house. You had to give 10% to the priesthood. These things, all of these things, right? But his commandments are not grievous. Why? Because all now you're doing is this. Look how easy this is, folks. This is it. If you had to ask me, this is the new covenant. The ability to look, behold, and adhere to the commandments of God with a spiritual mind that's capable of doing so, and having each man correct himself. Because if in that glass, at the end of it is Christ, to constantly look at it and correct ourselves to look like that which is in the mirror is the definition of Christianity. It's being a Christian. Being a Christian, being Christ-like, to follow the Mashiach, is to look in that image of the Mashiach and to make yourself look like the Mashiach. That's what it is, folks. You know, I talked about in the radio show that the Ark of the Covenant, which held the tables of stone, which you see is up there, glorious as they are, the Aaron's rod that budded, and also the manna that came from heaven. What did Christ say? I'm the bread of life. He said, I'm the one that come down from heaven. I'm the last Adam, the one that brings life, the rod that budded, the authority of the Levites transferred over to Christ, as is read in Revelations. Hebrews chapter 9. Knowing that our Savior sprang out of Judah, that were incapable of keeping that which is there because they, by reason of death, couldn't keep it. So it had to be transferred over to the Son. So, folks, this is what we get down to. This is New Covenant 31. And we're going to see exactly what's being expressed here as was being read. Behold, the days will come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break. Although I was an husband. It's so clear now, isn't it? After going through this lesson, this should pop to you. Although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord. He was a husband unto us. Remember, folks? He was a husband unto us. Was he bad? No. It was incompatibility in the relationship on our part. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts. Right? I will write it in their heart. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord, and they shall know me. We had to have a teacher, folks, but now we have the Holy Spirit who's in us. It's able to show us this thing and get us to correct ourselves. So hopefully a lot of people have been edified in this. I hope that you guys enjoyed the lesson. If you hit the like button, please do hit the like button. Support, because this is really comes down to, it really comes down to this. This is the new covenant. I'm welcome to receive any objections if people respectfully make a video. Must be a good adult dialogue about it. But I hope that with my little bit of artistic skills or whatever, in doing a presentation or a lesson this way, I was able to visually show a lot that occurs from the transferring of the old covenant to the new covenant, what those things were, what does it entail, and how those things should go. Again, if you want to hit me up, My email address will be Kevin or yeah, it should be Kev for Christ. It's KEV, the number 4, Christ, CHRIST at gmail.com. Or, leave a comment below or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and get off now. First, let me see if there's any questions, anything like that. Oh, Kansu, wow, man. That's what's up, though, man. You in the building, though. Hey, as long as you hear Kansu, you know what I'm saying? If you're going to, you know what I mean? If you come to somebody's house, you know how you eating their chips and their food, at least, hit the like button or something, man. You in the house. Hit the like button at least. Yeah, you can say my drawing suck, but hit something, man. Hey, go. Yeah, man. With that, I'm gonna say shalom and good night.